Hey everybody, it's Showan back with another episode of E equals MC squared, where entertainment equals meeples and cardboard. The box is squared. No, it's not. Today I'm going to show you an expansion for a game that I absolutely love. Now Kraken is an expansion for Abyss, designed by Bruno Catala and Charles Chevalier. It has interesting new mechanics, gives you more content, and you get your very own pet Kraken. So the question is the game any good? Well, join me for the next few minutes. I'll show you how it's played. Now, I've already done a review for Abyss, so if you haven't seen that yet, you should check that out. What I'd like to do is show you how the content within Kraken affects the base game, and then I'll go over in some detail about the choices and the strategy that players will have to make throughout the game. Let's take a look. Rulebooks are rarely noteworthy in my opinion. They either do their job, or they don't. Now Kraken's rule booklet, on the other hand, does an excellent job of explaining the changes made to the game. Now the way it's structured is that they'll introduce a module, they give you a nice description of how it works, and then that description leads into the introduction of the next module, and so on. So it's like a scaffolding technique, which makes it really smooth and flowing and very easy to read. And if you ever need to refer back to it for information, very easy to find. The only thing that I would have done differently, I would have included some kind of mini FAQ which describes in detail how some of the new Lords' powers interact with the ones from the base game. There were a couple of situations where I had to look things up online, but I mean, we're talking very minor situations. All in all, I think it was very well written, lots of detailed examples, very little room for questions. Excellent work. The Kraken are a new group of allies that may or may not appear when players go exploring. You can see that they have a value just like every other ally does, except these guys are considered wild cards. That means they can substitute for any race that you're missing when going to recruit a Lord. You can even take multiple Kraken and use them to recruit the same Lord. Let me show you an example. You can see here that the Hunter requires 2 races, one of them must be orange, and the total value has to be 8. Now either of these combinations will work. If I use the top combination here, I'm going to end up affiliating this 1, because it's the weakest. Now, that's not that great. I might want to use this combination here, and I'll explain what happens when you have a Kraken involved. While the Kraken can certainly help you in affiliating stronger allies, you have to decide, is it worth the risk in collecting all the nebulae and potentially losing points at the end of the game? Let's take a closer look at how that works. My favorite thing about Kraken are the nebulae. These black pearls represent dirty money, and they have a huge impact on how you play the game. Now the basic idea is that you don't want to be left holding any nebulae when the game ends, because each one you have takes 1 point away from your score. Not only that, the player who has the most nebulae is considered to be the most corrupt, and they'll lose an additional 5 points. The game comes with this totally unnecessary, but incredibly awesome Kraken figure. It will get passed around from player to player depending on who holds the most nebulae at any given time. This makes it very easy to tell who's the most corrupt. Now the designers could have included a simple token to do the same job, but I'm glad they opted for this miniature because it looks awesome. I mean, it's a shame there's no other use for it because it's just begging to destroy a ship or something. Now once you have them, you're going to want to get rid of your nebulae as fast as possible. Thankfully there's a number of ways to do so. They can be used just as you would a regular pearl, so that means you can use them to help you purchase allies from another player, or you can use them when trying to recruit a Lord and make up the difference with pearls. The catch is, you can only ever use 1 nebulous at a time, and in order to do so, you have to have gotten rid of all your pearls first. As I mentioned, the nebulae will certainly influence how you play the game. Normally I wouldn't even consider buying a level 1 or 2 ally, but now it might be a really good option if it helps me get rid of a nebulous. I also find myself using a combination of cards and pearls more often to help me recruit Lords, because that's a great way to burn through your pearls in order to be able to dump the nebulae onto other players. One other thing I notice is that players usually think twice about recruiting the Merchant Lords. Now they are the ones that grant you pearls. Speaking of Lords, that brings me to the next best part of Kraken. A new guild of lords has been added to Abyss, the smugglers. Now most of the smugglers have powers that help you get rid of your dirty money. To recruit a smuggler, the number of bubbles means that you need to use allies from that many different guilds, but they can be anything you want, including Kraken. 3 of these lords add a new mechanic to the game. These smugglers are the Sentinels. Each one has its own token, which you get upon recruiting them, and you'll keep it for the rest of the game. On your turn, you can use a Sentinel to reserve a stack at the Council, a Lord, or a face-up location. Now once reserved, you're the only player who can take that particular thing, and nobody else can remove you. The only catch is that there can only be a maximum of 1 Sentinel for each area of the board. This is a nice addition to the game because it allows players to be really aggressive, or you can just simply reserve something that will give you a good benefit. Now I've heard criticism that the Sentinels are not very exciting because they rarely show up in the game now, especially there being more lords. Now I guess that's true, especially if players are not using their pearls to refresh the lord stack each turn. But you gotta keep in mind, refreshing that stack is a great way to burn through your pearls so that you can spend your nebulae. So, as far as I'm concerned, Sentinels, spicy addition, can be very, very useful when they show up. The final module is a type of mini-game, and it has to do with the new locations added called sanctuaries. Now when you acquire a sanctuary, you're allowed to draw cards from the loot deck, and that becomes a push your luck type of mini-game in which you're gambling to try and get the best reward. Here's my sanctuary, which gives me access to the loot deck. Now you'll notice these cards each have a point value, and some of them have a reward on them. Now the other thing to note is this number here is also the number of duplicates that are in this deck. So for example, there's going to be four cards in here. There's going to be five cards. There will be like seven cards, and so on. So the way this works is you're going to reveal the top card, and potentially I'm going to have 4 points, and I'll get this reward right away. So in this case, 2 pearls. Now I can decide if I want to reveal another card. Okay, so again, now I have a total of 10 points. Not only did I get these 2 pearls, I also get a free ally card. So if I want to keep going, alright, there's a 7, so now it's looking pretty good. Now, do I want to keep going or not? That's the question I'm asking myself. Let's say, what the heck. Okay, so this is what you don't want to happen. As soon as you draw 2 cards that are the same, then you have to discard these. I mean, you still get these rewards, but you discard them, and the only points that I'll have are the 13 here. Now, I read comments from people saying that they thought that the loot deck was really swingy. I can understand why they would say that, because you can get some really, really great stuff, as well as up to 22 points. Yes, I did the math. Personally, I really like the sanctuaries because, assuming one shows up in the game, it can act as a nice catch-up mechanism, or it can be the final nail in the coffin. Now in the games I've played, I've seen people average anywhere from 10 to 12 points from the loot deck, so that's on par with most of the locations in the game, so I don't think that they're game breaking. But whatever your decision is, it's very easy to add them in or to leave them out, so you really can just play however you want. Kraken is a solid expansion. I love it because it adds new stuff without making the game any more complex. The new modules are interesting, and I just love the variety. Now, I think what players will notice most is that the new changes will really disrupt your routines and force people to play differently, which keeps the game feeling fresh. In my experience, Abyss was easy enough to teach to new gamers. And when I taught this along with the expansion to people who've never played Abyss before, they seemed to digest everything pretty well without feeling overwhelmed. And their scores were really good too, so I'm convinced that you could teach this as a complete package to people who've never played before, and you'd have very few issues, if any. Abyss is an excellent game, and it stands strong on its own. Now, Kraken may not be essential, but it certainly is a nice addition to the game, and I highly recommend getting it just to be able to have that variety and change things up whenever you want, and just to keep the game feeling fresh. I mean, it's staying in my collection. I wouldn't even dream of giving it away. As far as I'm concerned, you can't have too much of a good thing.